Exactly.
Literally only like 2 comments on the blogs that I answer.
Department areas that are where we have that committee, so I don't expect that we'll have it at the budget meeting.
Glad to hear of your interest.
Yeah, I really am. That
I've
because
always felt like
Yeah, she's said,
Now, did she have geological training?
Yep, she had a master's.
Setting up mailers.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Before they,
Bidding on the backs.
and I think you need to understand your demographics out there.
Yeah, and then
And
she got
I
it back
appreciate
in the
it.
60s.
It's great value.
No?
But that's going to attract a
bet
very
that's
different demographic.
You're on the air?
Oops,
I want to follow up with you.
I'm being called to service.
Not expecting Sharon tonight?
she said she would be a little late. She had another obligation.
Okay.
And she'll plan the meeting.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the Budget Committee meeting. May we have roll call, please?
Collins. Chrisman.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Keller. Canopa. Holden.
Here.
Olson.
here,
Summers.
Here.
Kellum.
Here.
Connolly.
Here.
Hopsinski.
Here.
Coburn.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Is there any public comment tonight? All right. Then we will continue with our department review, starting with the police department. While they're settling in, Mary, we had on the dais here handouts for each presentation, and then there is one for economic development, which is for Thursday night's meeting.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Budget Committee. You can put this way. Tonight, I have with me Lieutenant Alan Lynn. He is a Community Resource Lieutenant. He'll be helping me with the presentation. And I also have Donna Eilers here who will also be helping us in case you have any questions. First thing I'd like to cover is the staffing requirements that we're going to have for next year. This is, hopefully everybody has a copy of it. This is the second slide. For next year, total authorized positions is 92.25. That's going to be an increase of 3 1/3 positions. We added 2 police officer positions. One we currently have employed now. We did it as an unfunded position for this year and using budget savings to cover it. And then we're also adding a new one come July 1st. We've added a code compliance officer position, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, the partnership and kind of what we're working on. And we also increased our property and evidence position from part-time to full-time. And besides, other than the code compliance officer, all these positions are positions that the department used to have back in 2010, which still leaves us 3 frozen positions from where we were several years ago. The sworn positions, it's similar to how it was broken up last time when we talked about this. We have 4 squads that work 12-hour shifts. We have 9 per squad. My goal was to have 1 squad of 10. The reason for that, in case we get an injury or something, I'm able to move 1 person around so that we try to maintain 9 per squad. My goal was to try to have a traffic unit. We started that this year, but because of some shortfalls for the summer, I had 1 person working them. I'll have to pull them, put them back in patrol. So if you look at, we still have 6 people right now in different training phases. And you look at the number, that's about 1/10 of our department is currently in training. So everybody's hired. I don't have any vacancies. I'm going to have a vacancy in a couple of weeks, and we're working on to fill that position. So I'm full. It's just a matter between injuries and manpower trying to make it all work. This is similar to last time's presentation, and all for those who are watching this may not know the difference between Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. I'll kind of explain it. The FBI categorizes crimes in 2 categories, Part 1 and Part 2s. Part 1 crimes is divided between violent and property. Under the violent, you have homicide, rape, robberies, aggravated assaults. And under the property, it's basically, you have arson and any thefts. So breaking into houses, breaking into businesses, shoplifting, stealing, stealing cars, those types of things are all considered property crimes. So what they do is they look at Part 1 crimes and look at Part 1 crimes between different cities, try to do some comparisons to kind of see how different cities are doing. And they use that a lot for grant applications and different things, and you're trying to find different funding to help sustain kind of what's going on in your community. But you can't always compare Part 1 crimes between different cities. It's not always apples to apples. Some of that depends on the region. It's going to depend on where you live, location, how large the city is, because those types of things will change. So as you see through this presentation, we tried to categorize it between about 30,000 and 95,000 or so in population to try to do some comparisons so we get an idea of how we're doing compared to similar sized cities in the state of Oregon, because not every state has the same laws, so depending on what your laws are will affect your crime. So some of the laws when I came here, especially in the property crime area, in Arizona they're considered felonies. Well, here they're misdemeanors. Well, because there isn't as much of an impact, you may have more of those types of crimes here than you would in another state. So sometimes it's kind of harder to do those evaluations between different states. So looking at the first one that we have here, now remember the FBI doesn't release the 2015 statistics until about September, October timeframe usually. So everything you'll see on here is from 2014, and then I tried to add how we did last year on here, but I'm not sure where the Oregon average is. So when you look at our violent crime, historically Albany has a very low violent crime rate. It's always been below the Oregon average. Currently right now from 2014, we're almost 65% below the Oregon average. And when you look at that compared to other cities, when I get to that graph, you'll kind of see, I think we're like the second or third lowest violent crime. Property crime is another story. Property crime, typically Albany's been above the Oregon average. In 2014, we had over 17% decrease in crime altogether. Most of that was in property crime. Now, what I was worried about is I was worried that we weren't going to be able to sustain it, because over those last 2 years, we had over a 26% decrease in crime. Well, since we had such a large decrease, I was worried we were going to have a high increase. Well, in 2015, we had a 2.6% increase in crime altogether. So, but overall, for the last 3 years, we're still down over 23%. So that kind of gives you an idea of, kind of how we're doing, we're able to sustain it. And currently right now, we're about 20% down in Part 1 crime altogether. And that's about, as of today, that's about 146 less Part 1 crimes at this standpoint than we had the previous year. So when you look at Part 1 crime in general for 2014, we're about 11.22% above the Oregon average. Not sure how that's going to play out for 2015, because I think historically throughout the country we've had an increase in Part 1 crime. So Oregon may have had a little bit of an increase, so we may stay there, or we may go up a little bit. Now when you look at violent crime for city population from 30 to 95,000, as you can see, we are the second lowest, and then right above us is Oregon City. And you can see that the standard deviation, and that's probably a little bit high just because Medford's is so high, it kind of throws that off a little bit and it throws the line up a little bit higher. When you look at the property crime rate, we have the third highest property crime rate. So we're at 33.7 crimes per thousand. And that's gotten better. I think when we looked at the 2013 numbers, we were over the 40s, we're around 41. So we did put a good dent in it, except for 2015, it's up a little bit, but not a lot. And then right now, if we can maintain some of the gains that we're seeing right now, I think after this next year, we should maybe be right at the Oregon average or a little bit lower. And then for the 2014 Part 1 crime rates total, we're at 34.5. Now, when you look at sworn officers, Now, this does not include the 2 that we added this year, but because the population's grown, Albany used to be at 1.18 sworn per 1,000. We're down to 1.17 because population has grown, the department hasn't. Well, now that we've added 2, that'll change here over the next year. And then when you look at Part 1 crimes per sworn officer, now this is the slide that I look at for manpower to try to look at what's the workload like per officer. Now, it's not always apples to apples because Part 1 crime isn't the only types of calls the officers take. But it kind of gives you a little bit of comparison of how we're doing compared to other agencies with how many officers they have. So when you look at us, the standard deviation is about 26.4. So we're right now at about 29.5. So in order to bring us down, that would be, we would need 8 more officers. So we're adding 2 more next year, so we're off about 6 officers to bring us down to the middle of that range. And then some people ask, I've heard before, well, what would you do with the officers? Well, we would add 3 to patrol to try to bring all the squads up to 10. Permanently have 2 in traffic. We used to have 2 in traffic before. I'm hoping to get there even with the manpower we have now. I just don't know if I can make that happen. 1 more to detectives and 2 to street crimes. And I think a lot of the stuff we've been doing over the last year, especially with street crimes, with a lot of the drug interdiction and arrests that we've made, has had an effect on our crime being reduced. It takes a while. I tell people it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So, and there's not just one little thing you can point your finger on that's going to make it work. It's all part of the picture. It's crime prevention, it's enforcement, it's if we need to change a law, we change a law, it's being proactive, it's getting out, talking to the community, it's all of us working together. All that has an impact, but it all takes time. When you look at injury, fatal vehicle collisions, we increased only by 1 accident last year. So our goal, even though the population's gone up, for injury and fatal accidents, only up by 1. We didn't have any vehicle fatals, but we did have fatals from the train station. So the only fatals we had was somebody not seeing the train was coming and getting hit by the train. And then we look at calls for service. Our calls for service went up from 2013 to 2014, but we actually saw a reduction from 2014 to 2015. We're up from 2013, but we're down from last year. So we went up about 6%, and then we had a decrease of about 2-something%. I think I got that on another slide for this exact number. So we look at our accomplishments and some of our challenges. I think the slide kind of explains what I was talking about. So since 2012, we're about 23.7% reduction in Part 1 crimes, and then we're doing pretty good this year right now, and we'll see if we can maintain it. It's our car prowls, basically people breaking into cars, is down quite a bit compared to what it was last year. And I can't pinpoint exactly what we've done to make that happen, but I think it's a combination of everything we've tried. And then also, the police department received the 2015 DUI Enforcement Municipal Agency of the Year Award from the Oregon DUI Multidisciplinary Training Task Force. And that's for all the work that we've done over the last year with the DRE evaluations, with helping, we had Robert Hayes who helped the state legislature help maneuver through the law changes, kind of what the impact would be to law enforcement. We've had a lot of DUI IRS, and then plus that on top of all our calls for service. And then this is talks a little bit about the calls for service, and then our decrease at 2.4% last year. And one of the things that we're doing, we're currently accredited through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. We are moving to a national accreditation, which is called CALEA, and that is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. We're currently in the first year of evaluation. It's a 3-year program to be accredited, so it takes you about 2.5 years to get all the standards, and then they come out and do an on-site inspection. And CALEA is something that I was used to when I came from the Mesa Police Department. We had that CALEA there for years. CALEA has about 400 and some standards that you have to comply with. The Oregon Accreditation Alliance has 100 and some standards. So I knew there were some things that needed to be changed that we weren't doing that we needed to be doing. So when I got to a point where I can make that implementation, We had somebody in our unit, and I was able to move a couple people around to help him with that. So once we got the sufficient resources to do the work, we moved him towards that direction. Go.
So the Community Resource Unit is one of the units we have that actually has helped a lot in the proactive and the community education aspect of crime prevention. Part of that group is we have multiple things we're involved with. I lead a group called the Community Police Advisory Board. Has 8 to 15 members. It's neighborhood watch leaders, business leaders. We meet every other month. We talk about issues in their neighborhoods, what we can do to have a whole approach to that. Instead of just responding to it, how we can be proactive to it. And that's worked very well. We've been working with the downtown district with some of the issues we've had occurring recently down there and some of the neighborhoods with theft from motor vehicles and other things. We've helped them to identify what the issues are and give them some extra patrol and also give them some tools to help themselves out. Street Crimes Unit is one of the units I supervise. We currently have actually 3 members in there. We have a canine attached to it. However, he's on patrol temporarily until we get some manpower back on patrol. I have 2 detectives and a sergeant overseeing that unit. Their job is to look at the street level crimes, theft from motor vehicles, being proactive, finding the hot spots and targeting those. However, our focus, or what we've been focused on a lot lately, is narcotics and drug interdictions, and we've been very successful at that. In my time in the police department, this is probably the most active year I've seen in drug seizures and arrests for high-level drug dealing going on inside the city. Volunteers, I currently have 5 volunteers. They've did about, I will say, closer to 1,500 hours of volunteer hours. They've helped us put together meetings, do different projects for us, get out to the community and meet with them and see how we get part of the SASE program where they go out and inspect homes for seniors and make it safe for them. We have Albany Police and Kids Together called APAC. Last year we had 2 at-risk kids that we offer sports scholarships to. We allow them to go to the Boys and Girls Club or do a sports. That helps them keep them out of trouble, keep them off the street. A lot of these children don't have the guidance at home, and we're providing that for them. Bulb is another one that we do. It's a monthly thing where we have 2 students from each middle school that are recognized by the staff as they may have been trouble students last year or earlier in the year, but they made an improvement. Staff is recommending them. We bring them here. The mayor's there every month when we do this. We have a breakfast for them. We bring them in. We cheer them on. And all of that money's been donated by businesses to help us out to do that. We work with Linn County Mental Health. We have a crisis worker that we can call if we have someone in need or having a crisis. We can have them come in and talk to that person on the street versus us having to arrest them, take them to jail, or take them to the hospital. We can do it on site where they're more comfortable, and it's effective that way. Social media, we've been dealing with that, Facebook, Twitter, different things like that. One of the things with Facebook that we're doing is we have a My ID page. We have individuals that commit crimes that are caught on surveillance videos. We're not able to identify them. We don't know everyone in the city. Sometimes we feel like we do, but we don't. We can put that out to the public, and we've had a very good success rate in identifying those individuals and holding them accountable for the crimes they do. The club program is another program we offer through the Community Resource Unit. If you have a vehicle, especially an older Model 1, and you don't feel safe with it, you can buy the club from us at cost. It's $750. We don't make any money off of it, but we got a special deal through them. Put it on your car, keep your car from getting stolen. If it's used right, you won't be a victim of crime. And of course, that's tiny print, isn't it? SEPTEP reports. We did when we had Sandy Roberts working as our community education specialist. She was what we call SEPTEP certified, which is crime prevention through environmental design. She would go out to different businesses and projects that were going on and give them ideas of how you can make your business or your building safer and prevent crime happening. She would go to the planning meetings and stuff like that. Currently, we have lost Sandy Roberts to the fire department. We won't talk about that. We have her replacements in the process right now, and once he's on board and hired, we will get him SEPTED certified as well, and we'll continue that process. That's part of the city planning and the site review plans. She did about 15 of them over the last year. Some of the projects she worked on and that we'll continue to work on through my unit. Airport Road is the Coles area. If you notice there, that whole area was kind of in shambles there for a while. She worked really hard with the business owner. She's got the area cleaned up with ODOT and the motel there, cut down the trees. We've eliminated a lot of the issues we were having there. She helps out with OSU Shred Day, help people get their stuff shred so they're not throwing the paper or the trash, getting ID theft that way. Very big part of the Dave Clark Trail, getting that cleaned up, working with the Parks Department, getting the lights installed. She did run, now I run it, the Can You ID Me page. Warrants, we have a wanted person thing, we put that on our webpage, part of our Facebook, people can identify those and we've had successes with that. Bike registration, we have an online, you can call us and register your bike. That way we have your serial number. If it's ever stolen, we can give you that information. As you know, most people when they buy a bike, they don't register that number, they don't write it down in their home. When they lose it, it's hard to get it back to them. Some of the things we do, we have a treasure hunt that we work with the Parks Department on. We have, last year we had 452 children show up. They come out, they do different things there, have fun activities for the kids, get to learn about us. We run a safety camp. We run that twice in the summer. We run that with the fire department as well. Each summer we have about 200 kids, a lot of times with the at-risk students, that come in. We provide them a week-long class on safety issues. We have them fun, take them to the pool. They get to interact with the fire department, the police department. We do that twice each summer for a week long. Multiple grants. We had a $6,000 grant for APAC, or $6,000 worth in grants. Part of it was for APAC. Shop with a Cop, which is where we get together with DHS. We have children come with us. We provide them money at Walmart. We take them Christmas shopping for them and their family. Sassy, graffiti abatement. We go out, we help paint over graffiti. We give the tools to people to clean up their businesses and help them clean up that. Live Together Partnership, we've worked with them in helping reduce tobacco use and alcohol and drug use with our teenagers. Part of that is an e-cigarette program that we're working on right now. We go out to the schools, we talk to them about some of the dangers, some of the hazards, help them out with that. And then we also do a child seat installation technician, which is Darla Luther with our department, works with the fire department and other agencies. They hold clinics throughout the year. People come in and do the car seats and get them installed correctly.
So as I talked about earlier, we currently have 3 frozen positions. I'm hoping that over the next year, during the next budget cycle, we're able to bring us back up to where we were in 2010. One of our obstacles or something that we are dealing with is the equipment replacement fund being underfunded. We had to put quite a bit amount of our budget into that this year to cover shortages where usually would have a bigger fund balance in there, and we wouldn't have to put so much of the money in every year for it, because over the years we haven't been able to put that much money in. There isn't that much money in there, so instead of having several $100,000 that are rolling over, we don't have that anymore. So for the carryover, and this is for vehicles, so we have it divided by vehicles, and we have the rest of it for other items that we need, such as firearms, radios, tasers, replacement of those items. So for the vehicle portion of it, and that's where most of the money goes, the carryover for 16-17 was $46,000. So we had to add an additional $278,000 in order to break even. We tried to add as much as we could, so we added $330 this budget cycle, which gives us about $31,000 carryover for next year. And our current challenge I talked about right now is staffing. Because of injuries, we have multiple injuries over this year. Shoulders, people had to have surgery, so that's why I had to move people around in order to cover patrol. And that's just from fighting people in the community and taking them into custody. And that's where most of the injuries came from. We've had a couple retirements that, because of the way PERS is changing, I wasn't expecting them to retire for another year. So that caught us short a little bit when 2 of them retired, and then we had to hire and train people for that. And then we still haven't replaced them yet. Those that we hired for those 2 positions hopefully will occur at the end of the summer. It takes us about, I say usually it's about a year. You know, I'm hoping if we can have a pool of people, then it's about 10-month training time. But usually it's about a year if someone leaves for me to open the process up, recruit, hire, get them through all the background, send them to the academy, and get them through FTO. So we're moving a traffic officer, and we already moved the street crimes detective to patrol to help out, and plus we're moving both our SROs to patrol after the school year in June to help out also. So when I talk about more sworn officers are needed, that's just because we're currently short, and we're short, I think, for the workload. One thing that IACP does is they look at officer time. They do it in thirds. So a third should be on calls, a third should be proactive, and a third is admin time. Well, because of our current CAD system, I can't really come up with a good number for that yet. Hopefully, our new CAD system will have implemented. The goals to have it April of next year. So once that's implemented, and then I've got a year or two of some back data, I'd be able to get a good idea of kind of where we're at, and I could also use that as another tool to decide, okay, how are we really doing manpower-wise? Another thing we're working on is, I think this was several months ago, we saw in the newspaper that Lynn County was designated as a HIDTA county. HIDTA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And I was surprised when I first got here that we were the only county along I-5 that wasn't designated as HIDTA. Where I came from in Arizona, all the counties, most of the counties there, especially up and along I-10 and 17, they were all HIDTA counties. And the reason for that is because of the high amount of drug that goes on, activity that goes on, and you also get resources from the federal government for that. They provide manpower and they provide funds. So when I first got here, I talked to the sheriff about trying to do something to change that, but it has to come from the sheriff's department. I'm not allowed to put in for it. It has to be a countywide program. So they worked on it for a little while, and it's a little political, so we worked that angle a little bit, and we're able to get it designated as a HIDTA county. So what that does for us, that's not a lot of money, but the start of it is it gives us $55,000 extra a year, but we have to have a task force in place in order to receive the funds. You also will get other funds, what they call OCDF funds, for specific types of cases, plus it gives you more resources. So currently what we're doing now is the goal is next year when the new facility is done, we have a room that's going to be for future expansion. We are going to put in there the Lynn County Drug Task Force. So we're going to have a lieutenant from APD that'll be the supervisor. I'm going to provide one detective. The sheriff's department's going to provide 2 detectives. Lebanon's going to provide a detective. DEA is going to give us a detective, and we're hoping OSP will give us a detective. We're told that hopefully by March of next year they'll be able to give us a body. So that'll give us at least a body of 7, and then we'll go from there to see if we can expand that a little bit. Because in order to do even a good surveillance, you need at least 6 people to do it. So I'm hoping at some point if we can get to 8 or 9, we'll be able to make a very good impact in this area. So any questions on the HIDTA part? Okay. The code compliance officer, I noticed there for a while that because a current person who's doing code compliance, she's swamped. And we really, for a city this size, we didn't have anybody full-time that was doing it. So this is a program that some of the directors, we met and talked about and tried to put our heads together, see what we could do to fix it. So this is the program we came up with, is to put it under the police department. The goal is to have the code compliance officer, the crime prevention specialist, and the community service officers work together because they work on a lot of the same issues, and hopefully get some more enforcement done, some more communication out in the field. And a lot of the area where we have issues is in the CARA boundaries. So that was one of the reasons we went to Kate and says, you know, a lot of this is in CARA. Can CARA provide some funding to help put this program together? So once we all talked about it, the program we came for was a pilot program for the next 5 years. CARA is going to fund $50,000 of it. The building department, because of the loan that was given back, will fund $60,000 of it. So it's about $110,000 a year. Depending on the person where we bring them in with equipment, I may have to fund a little bit more than that to make it work, but it's going to be close in that range. Should fund most of it. And then my goal is hopefully we're trying to hire somebody now to have, so they can start July 1. Maybe a little bit beyond that, but it's going to be close to the July time frame to get somebody on board, because there's going to be a huge training aspect that we're going to have to do to get somebody trained up for that position, and then kind of work out the mechanics of everybody's used to having it going through the building department, and we got to change that so it comes over to the police department. So looking at our proposed budget, the overall budget increase is about 8.28%. Remember, there's also a $110,000 increase in there for the new position that's coming out of CARA. So I think before that it was like 7% increase until we added the CARA money. And the levy increase is 7.85%. So what I did is, kind of what I did last year, is I broke down where are our largest increases or our largest differences in the budget. It's in personnel services. You'll see a significant increase in overtime, and the reason for that is CAD RMS training that we're going to have to do once we implement the new system. I'm going to have to get everybody through about a 32-hour course somewhere in there, and then plus the dispatchers, I think might be 80 hours, like 40 to 80 hours. So we had to add some money, so we added about an extra $90,000 to overtime to try to cover all the training that we have to do for that. And then in materials and services, the extra $45,000 that's in there for software maintenance, that's more of that's the money that we normally get back from the sheriff's department. It's more of a accounting procedure. Before, it was just being put into our budget versus it being a revenue source, so we changed it this time. Donna Eilers has done an excellent job. This is her first year putting the budget together. She found a lot of errors and has fixed those. So she did a very good job asking a lot of questions and then going through our equipment replacement, trying to make sure that was correct and fixing some of these other things here. And then when you look at the levy, so between the equipment replacement and materials and services and the levy, we put the large increase of equipment replacement into the levy. The levy hasn't contributed to equipment replacement for the last couple of years because there wasn't enough money in there to do that. So this year we took the extra money that was in the levy and added it to equipment replacement to help offset. Yes?
Is that 7.85 taking into account that the levy passes tonight?
Well, remember,
No.
the levy doesn't expire until next year, so we have another year in the levy.
No, I was thinking in terms of...
If it passes, no.
If
That does not have
it
the
passes,
increase.
we don't have to give money from the levy into CARA.
Correct. No, that is not in here.
You know, if you stretch this out, we might find out here.
I'm working on it.
8 o'clock is coming.
Well, it depends on...
I'm not asking you to
Do you have
stretch
any
it out.
questions?
Well,
I have a couple questions. In some years, we've talked about hiring officers from other cities so you don't have to quite do as much training. Have you been able to do any of that in the last year?
We currently have the lateral process open all the time. Some of the problems we have is some officers that try to leave, a lot of them have baggage, so you have to be careful on who you hire. When officers leave, especially in Oregon, you start back on the bottom again, seniority-wise. So a lot of officers don't want to leave where they're at because now they can't get the shift they want, they don't get the overtime they're looking for. So there's a lot of other, if they want to transfer to a specialized unit, now they got to wait longer because they're bottom on the seniority, those types of things. So you don't see a huge trend of officers moving around. We do hire some. I do have one that hopefully he'll be able to start in the next month that we hired that's a lateral from within the state. A couple others we hired were from out of state, from California. So yeah, we do that, but I like to see more of it. We just right now don't have a big pool of applicants, but I think that's a trend throughout the state. A lot of the different cities now are having a hard time hiring because they can't get qualified applicants in the door.
And did you, other than retirements, did you lose officers to other cities in Oregon or other states?
I had one recently decided he was going to be a farmer full-time. And then I had another one who will leave the end of this week, going to LCSO. He lives in Lebanon and wanted to, basically, he can go available from his house.
And the crisis worker that was mentioned in one of the slides, is that a police department employee or a county mental health employee?
County mental health employee, and he actually works out of Tangent at this current time.
Okay, so the female officer that I've seen, like in the paper, down along the river, going into the camps with police officers, she's not a mental health worker?
She was. She has since left, and She got a job in Bend.
Okay. There are other questions?
Can you give us an update on the pawn shop ordinance? Has that been in effect for about a year now?
Yeah, I think we're about a year and a half or so, something like that. We haven't had any issues. Everybody's been in compliance. I think a lot of it, remember, it's more towards deterrence. We'll catch something here and there based on something that comes through, but everything now, since we can track it all, it's more of a resource tool for us. But since they know, the criminals know that it gets reported to the police department, we don't have the issues we're having before where they were going to the pawn shop to pawn it.
I'm just wondering if there's any measurables. You talked about how our property crimes are up and burglaries and...
Well, actually, right now, our residential burglaries are down for the year. That's why I said it's hard to really pinpoint the one exact thing that's working. I think it's a combination of everything. But when you look at our business burgs are down 68%, our res burgs are down 36%. I mean, they're not huge numbers. They're down from this time last year we had 42. Now we've only had 27. And then business burgs last year we had 25, and then now we've only had 8.
Did you get any feedback at all from the pawn shop owners that people aren't coming in like they used to, or, hey, I'm here to tell you they've all gone to Corvallis with their stolen stuff, or any idea of the impact of the
I
ordinance?
have to ask somebody in the detective unit. I haven't heard anything where there's been an issue where they've said anything about that.
A lot of the owners thought it'd be a lot of additional paperwork and hassle and so forth. Again, I'm just looking for some kind of feedback on the
Everything's
whole
electronic.
program.
So they report electronically, they report to Leads Online, and Leads Online was developed by the pawn shops. It wasn't developed by law enforcement, and it's just a tool that it helps them track what's coming in and out the door, and then we also are able to use it too.
I haven't heard anything, so
Yeah, I've heard
when
it.
they aren't complaining, that usually
Right.
means it is working.
When I was working patrol and talking to some of the pawn shop owners, none of them had complained or had any issues with the system at all.
A lot of them wanted it. It was some of the secondhand stores that didn't want it.
Well, I think Albany Guns was already doing it anyway, they said, a lot of it, so. Okay, thank you.
Will, then Rich.
One thing that kind of surprised me was to see a 20% reduction in fuel costs. As much as you guys drive, how are you managing to reduce your fuel consumption?
It's not really reducing fuel consumption, as that line item has always had extra money in there. So when you look at it over the years, we've had too much money in there, so we just cut back the amount of money that we've been putting into that line item because we haven't been spending it.
It also went from $4 a gallon to $2 a gallon.
Yeah, that's another reason.
That makes a difference.
Right. If it goes back up to $4 a gallon, I might be in trouble, but until then, we're okay.
Rich, then Ray.
Okay, if we're in the line items, then a couple of questions. On page 263, the program 1301, line item 66011, equipment replacement, shows a pretty hefty jump. And I was then comparing that to page 267, which was the levy equipment replacement, which has a proposed $130,000 with nothing change in percentage. I'm wondering if there's a relationship between the two departments and the equipment replacement, or what?
I think it's because nothing's been added for the last few years. It's been at zero because there was no numbers in there.
There's nothing to compare it to.
There's nothing to compare it to, and I think it would, I think the number in there, it would have given you invalid error.
We were talking about vehicles and...
Correct.
Yeah, I think that-
Most of that's going to vehicles.
Okay.
We only allocated, I think, about 21,000 or so to the other items. Everything else goes to vehicles.
Okay, and then one last question on page 265, program 1301, miscellaneous expenditures. What are some examples of things that couldn't be classified otherwise? Miscellaneous seems to be a rather nebulous catch-all.
That's what it is by definition.
I think some of our petty cash items come out of there. Is that right? And then sometimes miscellaneous items, if I'm seeing a little, I'm careful on some of the other categories, if I'm going to go over a little bit. If I see a little bit of a savings, and because we've been short equipment, I may go out and buy a piece of equipment. If I put that under minor, it'll kind of throw me off on why the amount we spent so much. So I may categorize that in miscellaneous, knowing that, okay, miscellaneous, we normally put about $10,000 in there. And we went up a little bit this time, but we normally put that much in there, so you may, like for next year, you'll probably see a big jump in there, because...
It's a small safety valve.
Well, because we're trying to replace a bunch of our tasers and those types of things, so.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, that credit card fees is a separate line item. Yeah.
That's the same thing
Okay.
with everybody else.
Rich, you have a question?
I did. Oh, I do. California just had a pretty good-sized, had been having pretty good-sized jump in shoplifting because of the way their law changed. When I was talking with the merchants here, I came to understand that some of them don't really cooperate all that much when they have shoplifting. And it occurred to me that maybe somebody ought to talk to them. I mean, is our level of shoplifting going up, down, sideways? I mean, it just seems to me that if somebody has, $100,000 a year going out the door, that they would cooperate more.
I think sometimes it depends on the store, and it depends on what they see as a benefit. A lot of them, remember, our court system here, because if the shoplifting is a misdemeanor, which most of them are, they go through our court system. Well, our court system here does not do restitution, so they don't get anything out of it. The way they get their money back or get anything is through the civil process. So a lot of them will decide to go civilly with it and impose a civil fine to get payment back versus calling us and doing it through the court. It just depends on what their policies are. Some of them will have a cap, say anything under $50 we won't call. If it's over $50 we do call. It just depends, and every store varies. And some of it also depends, some of the stores won't allow them to stop people. So they'll go out the door and they may have a camera photo of it, and then they'll call us later, and then we gotta try to backtrack. And then we use the Can You ID Me page to try to see if we can ID the person that walked out the door and try to figure out what merchandise they took and is there enough in there for us to charge.
Well, when I was in the meeting, in the merchant meeting, that they were passing pictures back and forth, and it was obvious, oh yeah, I know that guy. He came in last Thursday, and oh, he was over at our Corvallis facility on Tuesday, and the same group of characters hitting numbers of stores. And you said we don't have restitution. Now, is that Albany, Oregon, who is it?
Albany City Court.
It's an Oregon thing. If you're a municipal court, they don't have restitution. However, if it goes through a circuit court, like next across the street here, they're allowed to pass restitution on. Don't know why that is. It's somewhere in some legislation somewhere, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
I noticed one on page 268, to talk about the grants funds that we have. And I noticed that the bottom on the asset forfeiture is that we just didn't have any this past year, or not planning for any going forward?
Well, the way the laws of, or the way the federal government is currently changed, they changed it like the end of last year, where they will no longer adopt any of our cases. So what's occurred is before there was an 80-20 split. So we get 80% of the seized assets, they would take 20% of it. And we'd be able to call them up and they would adopt our case. The state law here is much different, where the state takes a good portion of it, so we were going federally with a lot of those cases. Well, nothing was set up here in Lynn County to take them to the state. We have since fixed that, and the DA, Doug Martini, has put a program together. We currently have our first one that we've done. We received about $6,000, so we're working that out. But it's going to cost us about $2,000 just to go through the process itself of paying the attorney fees. Then you have to post it in the newspaper. So our minimum that we were going to do is about $2,000. So anything above $2,000 we can take. If it's below $2,000, it's not worth trying to do it, because we'll actually lose money. We're trying to bring that up, and that'll probably change a little bit more with the HIDTA task force, because once we have a DEA person assigned to the task force, as long as they're a part of the group, then we can take it federally and they'll adopt the case. But if our street crimes unit does it, we have to take it state.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you ready?
Yeah. Evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Budget Committee. My name is John Bradner, and I'm the Fire Chief for the Albany Fire Department. And it's my honor tonight to present the Fire Department's budget, and also it's my honor to continue to serve the department as its Chief Spokesman and the Chief of the department. I wanted to start off tonight with passing along a story that I heard just actually earlier today. And it was a good reminder for me of the extraordinary things that our people do day in and day out that the community never hears about. I come before you and I present the budget, and you get to hear about all the different maybe programs we're working on and different information that you know, that I choose that I want to pass along. But not as frequently do you get to hear about the extraordinary events. And in the department, we might talk about them, but when we talk about them, they almost at times become commonplace. And so with that, I want to tell you, I was talking to a couple medics earlier today on Medic 13, Shane Castle and Hans Wurzlev, and they were talking about Hans' first shift. Hans is one of our newest employees, or Hans, excuse me, I'm saying it wrong. Hans is one of our newest employees, and on his very first shift, his very first call, he got a patient in the back of the medic unit, and the patient went into cardiac respiratory arrest. The two of the medics worked together. They did CPR. They shocked the patient, and by the time they had the patient in the hospital, the patient was back talking to them, which for us is at times almost commonplace. It's just something that we talk about in passing. But I thought it was a really good story to pass along to you guys to just exemplify the extraordinary things that they do day in and day out that the community never hears about, never knows about. But by them being in the right place at the right time with the right training, the right skills, and Hans on his very first day, they were able to save this gentleman's life. So I just thought I'd pass that along because I think it's a great story and just shows you the value of having the medics out there and having them fully trained and ready to go on day one. So
He's probably wondering, is this going to happen every day?
Yes, exactly. Well, I understand his first 3 shifts were code 3 calls right out of the chute first thing in the morning. So, but anyway, so I'm extremely proud of them, extremely proud of the department and the outstanding job that they do every day. And so, with that, it's my honor to present the budget. I wanted to start off with a picture that you see in the PowerPoint up on the TV there, and then also in the packet in front of you of the current Fire Station 11 downtown. And I didn't feel like I could really speak about this presentation tonight without at least giving some recognition to that fire station. Station 11 has served our community, and it's stood proudly for 66 years now. And while it's been a significant project of mine in the departments for a number of years to replace the station, it's still done us a very good job. Done the community proud, done the department very well of providing throughout its 66 years a place that many of our people call home. That's where they live 1 out of every 3 days of their life, and they respond to calls, and they've served the community proudly out of Station 11. So I just wanted to talk real briefly about that, recognize that, and then just give a real brief update on that. Many of you hopefully by now have heard that this Friday, May 20th, there'll be a public open house from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. I'd invite anybody to come to that who wants to come to that. It's just kind of a one last chance for the public to come and say farewell to the station. And then the last shift that will be actually operating a crew out of there will be Sunday, May 22nd. And at 7 o'clock in the morning on May 23rd, we will stop responding out of that station, and we will transfer from there to the Hill Street site, 1120 Southeast Hill, right by the Boys and Girls Club, Crabtree Automotive, there in that area. And then for the next year, 15 months, however long it is, until the new station is built and ready to be occupied, the crews will be responding out of that station. On June 1st, we're targeted to hand the building over to the demo contractor, and they'll be going through and spending about a week doing some hazmat abatement and cleaning the structure out, if you will. And then roughly a week into June is when you'll really start to see some activity over there as they tear the new station, or the old station down, not the new station. So anyway, I just wanted to pass along that information to everybody and make sure everybody's aware of where things were at with Station 11.
Are you going to recycle the fire pole?
Yes, we are. So it has one remaining fire pole in it, and it will go into the new station. It's too short to be used as a working fire pole, if you will, in that station.
That can be fixed.
It can. It is true. It can be fixed. But we're actually going to recycle it in the front lobby, and we're going to create a pole that kids can slide down. We get that question frequently of parents and kids, especially wanting to slide down the pole.
What about big kids? Able to years ago.
Yes, years ago they did. So, or city councilors or budget committees members, if you guys want to slide down the pole.
It'd be ugly to watch me slide down that pole.
There you go. But there'll be some steps up and an ability to slide down, 5 or 6 feet or something like that. So it will be recycled more for public education, if you will, than anything else. Okay. Okay, so what your fire department does, following a similar format to last year and just providing some of the same information but expanding on it, I guess, if you will, a little bit. Obviously, everybody knows we respond to fire and medical emergencies. 81 square miles of fire protection, 205 square miles of ambulance response. Our ambulance response area, where the ambulance goes, is larger than the fire protection districts. We provide fire protection not only to the city of Albany, but also to 3 surrounding fire districts. And then we provide advanced life support ambulance response clear to south of Halsey and kind of just down that I-5 corridor, halfway between here and Lebanon, halfway between here and Corvallis. So that's a 205 square mile area. Excuse me. In 2015, we had 7,505 emergency responses. That's a 3-year increase of 25.8%. And I'll show you here on a chart in just a minute a little bit more about that. Often when I'm talking to groups about this fact, they'll ask me, well, why? Why are you seeing those increases? What's going on? And so I thought instead of you asking that question, I would go ahead and just answer that question up front as far as my opinion as to why we're seeing those increases. And probably the first reason, and I think maybe one of the biggest reasons, is that more people have insurance. The Affordable Care Act has come into play, and obviously we have more people on insurance than we've ever had before, and so because of that, we see more people utilizing our services because of having more people having insurance. We have more senior facilities in town. Our newest one that was built and opened up about 6 months ago is Bonaventure in North Albany. And probably maybe last year at this time while they were building it or something, you may have heard me say that for every room or every bed that they have at a senior facility, it's expected knowledge, I guess, if you will, that each room or each bed equals 1 additional call per bed. And they've got, I believe, 143 or 144 beds, or I should say rooms there. And in the first 6 months, or right about 25 weeks that it's been open, we've run 65 calls there. So we're on pace to do probably just a little over 130 for the year. And like I said, it's just a little over 140 rooms that they have there. So it's holding true to form with that. And then we see more of them coming in. There's another one going to be built on Waverly, and obviously the more senior facilities, the more calls that we're going to run. And then along those lines also, it's common for people to come to the conclusion of, well, we've got an aging population. So because of that aging population, that's why you're writing more calls. So recently I decided, well, I want to test that theory. Is that true that we have an aging population? I mean, I know there's more baby boomers coming into retirement and all that stuff, but can I find some data, if you will, that tells me that we do have an aging population? So I went back and I looked at old information, old city information, and I actually found a report done in, I believe it was 2007 or something like that. And what I found was that in 1980, in the census for 1980, the median age for an Albanian, a citizen of Albany, was 27.6 years old. So 1980, 27.6 years old was the median age. Fast forward to 2010, 30 years later, the median age for an Albanian was 35.6. So an increase of exactly 8 years in age from 1980 until 2010. And I couldn't find really good data since 2010. I found kind of data all over the place. But actually looking at the census, it definitely confirmed that we are getting older. And so that is a part of it. So I thought that that was interesting. The next question I commonly get then is, well, are you running more medical calls, more fire calls? You know, where is that increase? And so the third bullet point there shows you that in last year, in 2015, 86.6% of our calls were medical calls, and 13.4% of them, or the rest of them, were fire or other types of calls. So then I went back and I said, okay, has that been increasing? And so I looked at 3 years and 6 years, and you can see that over a 3-year period of time, that was a 1.2% increase in medical responses, and then over a 6-year period of time, it was a 2.5% increase in medical responses. So yes, we are running more medical calls, which plays into the aging population and the more people on insurance and more senior facilities. I think all those things tie hand in hand as to explain why we're seeing such an increase in our call volume. And then the last bullet point there, just kind of as an FYI piece of information for you, in 2015 we transported 4,427 patients to hospitals, and that's a 3-year increase of 31%. So we're definitely taking more, as we're getting older, we're taking more people to the hospital. This is a chart that just shows our 911 calls over the last, I guess, 7 years there, from 2010 through 2016. Like I said, last year, 2015, we did 7,505 calls. And in 2016, we're on pace with about 7 weeks left to go in this fiscal year to just break over 8,000 calls. And that would then make up that 3-year increase of 25.6 or 8%, 25.8%.
So that makes it about 21 calls a day?
Yeah, we're right now running, I believe it's just under 22, or right at 22 calls a day. Yeah. And when you compare that to, well, 2010, we were probably about 16 calls a day, so it's gone up in that short period of time, it's gone up about 6 calls a day. So definitely an increase.
At some point, we were, last year, I think you were going to investigate whether or not care facilities were using us to help their understaff situation. Did we in fact do that?
Yeah, and here shortly I'll be coming forward to the council with a proposal for a fee increase, an ambulance fee increase, and that'll be included in the whole proposal. So I haven't done anything on that yet because it's time for us to increase the ambulance rates, and so I wanted to tie those all together at the same time.
Well, an ambulance fee, well, what happens if we don't transport them, though?
Well, that
A
could,
fee to do that as
yeah,
well.
that could be
Okay.
part of it. It doesn't have to be tied to just a transport.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
So of those 911 calls, are all of them legitimate?
No, they're not all legitimate. I would say that the vast majority of them are, but occasionally there's bad information. Somebody hears something, somebody drives by and sees somebody barbecuing in their backyard, and they think that, oh, there's a fire, the house is on fire. They call us, we go out there, it's somebody barbecuing in the backyard. So there's a lot of good, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's good intent calls. There's all kinds of different levels of calls, but of those calls, 8,000 this year, those all came through the 911 center to us, and then our crews were dispatched. obviously respond to calls, but I just wanted to reiterate some more things that our fire department does. We train. We do a lot of training. We focus on training because, like I said at the beginning of my conversation, or my talk tonight, we got to be ready on day one. Those crews have got to be ready to handle that cardiac arrest scenario, that structure fire, that explosion, that car wreck, the stroke, whatever the call may be. We have to be ready for it on day one and then every day thereafter. And so we do focus on training. We're focusing currently on community risk reduction, and you'll hear me talk about that a few times tonight. Really looking and examining what the risk is in the community to our citizens, and from both life safety and fire, if you will, and then what is it that we can do to reduce that risk. And you'll hear me speak about that a little bit more a little later. Public education, we're going to get out and educate the public on those fire and life safety types of topics and things that they can do to help reduce that risk to themselves and to the community. Fire investigations, we are very aggressive investigating the fires that we have in our district. Fire code inspections, we have a life safety division that spends a considerable amount of time trying to get into businesses and just make sure that they're safe for our crews and then also for the public. Plans review, we do participate in the plans review process, focusing on access and water supply. City emergency management, Daryl Tedish is our city emergency manager, and so we in the fire department focus on earthquakes and floods and all kinds of different things to be prepared for those types of situations. Ambulance billing and collections, I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. Something I'm really proud of is that our ambulance billing staff collected over $2 million this last year in revenue. It's the first time we were able to actually eclipse the $2 million mark, and you'll see some more information on that. And then our fire med program, I figured if nothing else, I've got to be able to talk about the virtues and values of having fire med, $65 program, to where if an individual has a membership in that program and they need an ambulance, then we won't bill them, we'll bill their insurance company, but there'll be no out-of-pocket to that individual. And that's a very popular program and one that's been successful for a long time, longer actually than I've been here. So,
how's enrollment coming this year?
We're in the middle of it right now, so May, June is enrollment. I know that on Monday 1, the first Monday, which I'm not sure exactly what day that the applications went out, but there's always that first Monday after people have the weekend to sign their applications out. We received just over 500 applications on that one day, which was a very significant number according to our ambulance billing staff. So, so far so good, and I'm anticipating it to continue to stay that way.
I think I was in that group.
Were you? Good. Thank you.
Chief, the fire inspection for businesses, if I understand it correctly, we used to sometimes companies I'd been working in, the state fire marshal would come if they had like a license renewal and they had to have an inspection. It's my understanding they don't do that anymore, and that's done from the city?
Yes. I mean, it depends on what it is. If it's a healthcare facility, it's done by the state. If it's a child care facility, that type of facility, they have to have an annual inspection, and that's done by our department.
So are you billing that or being paid by the agency?
No.
No,
No, it's part of our just code inspections that we do on a regular basis.
Okay.
So what's driving our budget decisions? And Wes may not remember this, or may remember this or not, but early on in our directors' meetings, I wrote down a point that he made, and he said, in your budget presentations, be prepared to state what's driving your budget decisions. It's like, oh, that's good, I like that. So I actually wrote that down, put it on a Post-it note, put it on my desk, and then as I was preparing my budget, it's like, okay, what were driving my budget decisions for this presentation? So really what it comes down to is I believe three different things. Increased workload, which you've seen that, and I demonstrated that already, and then the demand for service. More people are requesting our service, and we're just running more calls. The need to reduce overtime and work-related injuries. Overtime this year, we're on pace to actually expend about $150,000 more than last year in unreimbursed overtime. And actually might even be a little bit more than that, but obviously we're not through the year completely, but our overtime budget has gone up significantly. And you'll see here in a little bit that part of what I'm proposing to reduce that overtime is to add 3 firefighter positions back, positions that we also, kind of like PD, lost during the recession. I believe that will help assist us with lowering that overtime budget, and that's our target for that as well. And then the second part of that, the need to reduce the overtime and work-related injuries. We've seen, just like the police department, an increase in the work-related injuries. And I believe that that's due in large part to the significant increase in calls. From going from 16, 17 calls a shift to 22 calls a shift, there's just many more exposures for our people to twist an ankle or throw out a shoulder or hurt a back or do something along those lines. And so looking back at the last 3 years, we've actually had 47 time loss injuries over the last 3 years that have resulted in an average of over 550 lost days per year from individuals being injured. And the vast majority of those are work-related injuries. People running more calls, and another fact that we're dealing with is that as our population is getting older, we're also getting larger as well. And so that's an issue that we have to deal with at the same time. So the second, what's driving my budget decision, is the need to reduce overtime and work-related injuries. And the third there is a need and my strong desire to be more proactive rather than reactive. I really feel like that with the budget downturn over the last number of years, that it put us into a more of a reactionary mode, and so my focus this year, with a little bit more breathing room in the budget, is to start becoming even more proactive than we have in the past.
Chief, is that number of injuries, is that comparable to other departments of similar size?
I think it's high. I know that my assistant chief had some meetings. Shane Wooten had some meetings, if I remember correctly, with the workers' comp people. And Shane, do you remember?
Yeah, so we invited the department and to let us know if we were an outlier or were we kind of sad in things. Ultimately, what they said was, we are above average, we do have more, we weren't the highest, but we have some work to do. And then from there, we asked any sort of advice that they have for us to help right now. We've been doing some adjusting to our policies on how before we would allow one person on a stretcher to hold the weight of the patient, but now we were putting 2 try to minimize the micro injuries that occur from the same weight. We're also hearing devices out there that we having to load the stretchers, but there are mechanical systems that can do that for us. Right.
Thank you, Shane. So the need to be more proactive rather than reactive, and just to highlight that renewed focus on community risk reduction. So I want to talk briefly about a couple new department programs that we're doing that I'm really proud of. And Mary's got a handout over there that she's going to pass down the line. But the first one is our community paramedic program. And the council's heard me talk about this. I brought this to them here a number of months ago, and so this is going to be some old news to them, but this is a new flyer that we're using to get the word out about our community paramedic program. A lot of times, individuals access health care in the most expensive means possible. So they wait until their situation gets to a point that maybe it's dire, or maybe they don't have any other resources or any other avenues, or feel like they at least don't have any other avenues, and so they pick up the phone, they call 911, and they get an expensive ambulance to come to their front door. And then we pick them up, and for a $1,200 or so ambulance ride, we take them to the only place that we can actually transport patients to, and that's to an emergency room. And then they access the health care in the hospital system through the most expensive means possible, the hospital emergency room. And they go through that process, and maybe 4 or 6 hours later, they walk out with a pill bottle of antibiotics or something like that, or a painkiller, or who knows what the case may be. Whereas if somehow we could have intervened sooner, earlier, or in a different way, we could have kept that individual from accessing the healthcare system in that most expensive means possible. And so fire departments across the nation have started looking toward what's called a community paramedic program. And so we went as a department here end of last calendar year, I believe it was in November, December, we went to IHN, Intercommunity Health Network, which is the coordinated care organization for Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties here in the Mid-Valley. And we applied for a grant to be able to put on a community paramedic, and we were approved. And so it's a one-year grant from January 1st of 2016 through December 31st of this year. And they are providing all of the funding, the equipment, supplies, use of the vehicle, everything that we need to be able to, and the salary, wages and salaries, of course, for a community paramedic to be there and to be available. And one of our selling points to the department, I guess, if you will, is that we believe that we're going to see a reduction in the individuals who call us on a regular basis. Some of those same people who have a medical situation, they maybe go to the hospital, and then maybe 2 weeks later they weren't able to get their prescription filled, and so their medical problem continues, and then they end up calling us back, and they repeat the cycle over and over again. And we see that, unfortunately, all too common. And so as a department, if we can intervene, we believe that those individuals and those repeated calls to 911 and requests for an ambulance will decrease. And I'm happy to state that our initial information, our preliminary information, is that on those types of calls we are seeing reductions. We have an individual, Hillary Kosmicki, who is our community paramedic, and she is, in the first couple months, seen 60 patients, or she likes to call them clients, and she's able to do all the different services that are listed there, from a medical assessment to home safety assessments, to being a referral, a resource referral, doing all kinds of things with the individual to help get them the resources that they need, to help get them in contact with the people that they need in order to help resolve their problem. She's had, I talked to her just the other day, and she's had an occurrence to actually take somebody to the pharmacy to go pick up their prescription. They were released from the hospital, didn't have a way, didn't have a family, didn't have the means to get there, and she said, come on, let's go get your prescription. The whole purpose of that is to get that person the medication they need to keep them from getting sick again and to keep them from calling us. So we're really pleased with that program. We're seeing some successes early. We're still very early in the process, but it's something that we're very proud of. The next new program that we're doing is a single-role advanced life support medic unit, and we're doing that collaboratively with Lebanon and Tangent fire districts. And so last year at this time, I sat before you here and I talked about wanting to bring on a basic life support medic unit. And we were going to bring on a couple of EMT basics and then put them on a medic unit and then have them handle the non-emergent calls in our district. Well, after got approval through the budget, started trying to figure the program out. How's this going to work? And ended up then having a conversation with Lebanon's fire chief, and he said, what are you doing over there? Because I heard you're doing some type of a new program, and I told him, and he said, well, here's what we're doing over here. And what we both realized is that the programs we were going to put on individually were going to not be as good as what we could put on together collectively or collaboratively together. And so from there, then we started talking about, okay, what is it we can do? And what it's come down to is our Medic 71 program. And we call it Medic 71 because while they'll be Albany single role, so they won't be firefighter paramedics, they'll just be paramedics and EMTs, They won't have the firefighting aspect on it, but we'll have Albany employees with Lebanon employees that will be on a medic unit together, side by side, sitting out at Station 71, which is the tangent fire station, and they're responding on calls in both of our districts. They'll be mobile, they'll be able to respond whichever the direction they need to, and one of our focuses for this unit is helping and handling our out-of-town transfers. And you may have heard me say this before, but we handle a lot of out-of-town interfacility transfers from Albany General to Good Sam, to Portland, to Salem, to Eugene. And today, when that happens, we're taking a dual-role, cross-trained crew out of the North Albany station, typically. It can occasionally be one of the other stations. And we're sending them, some of our most experienced people at times, on a turnaround, 3-4 hour trip up to Portland to take a patient to the hospital. Those individuals then aren't back here for our community able to handle that structure fire that happens across the street from the fire station, or that cardiac arrest, or whatever the other case, the medical emergency or fire emergency may be. This Medic 71 crew will be able to take single role, so just paramedics, just EMTs, be able to take those individuals, send them out of town on the transfer, leaving our dual role, more trained, if you will, individuals available for handling that call that happens within our community. It's going to benefit both us and both Lebanon, and we believe it's a program that will continue to grow over time. And so we're really excited about that, collaborating with them and just venturing out and trying this new program. So every year I like to remind you of the non-City of Albany property tax revenue that we bring into the department. So this pie chart just shows the four main areas of revenue that we bring into the city. In 2014-15, because that's last year, obviously, that we have full data. We're not through 15-16 yet. Still have another 7 weeks in that. So we brought in just over $4.2 million in revenue, and that supports approximately a third, or 33%, of our fire department's annual budget. That's made up of the fire med, which I spoke about, which last year we received $188,000 from that. Bill was asking how the program's doing earlier. Year before this, as I was updating this chart, we brought in $165,000. So it went from 165 to 188. Grants and reimbursable programs, I talked to you about the grant we received from IHN and other grants. In 2014-15, we brought in $350,000. We, as I stated earlier, we contract with 3 rural fire districts, and we brought in just over $1.4 million from them. And then, as I spoke of earlier, our ambulance service fees eclipsed $2 million last year, and actually $2,200,000 just over that. And we'll exceed that this year, in the current year that we're in. We'll exceed that amount. We're running more calls, and so obviously there's more invoices, and so we'll see more revenue from that. So, proposed budget overview. Just a reminder, we have 3 different budgets in the fire department, besides our grants that are at the back of our section. The public safety levy, which is 1202, our fire and life safety budget, which is 1203, and then 1208, which is our fire emergency services. That's the combined fire suppression and ambulance budget. All total, our budget for next year is $14.2 million. Often I get asked, what's the breakdown between personnel costs and materials and supplies or services? And you can see the dollar breakdown, and then the almost 84% of the budget being personnel costs, and about 16% of the budget being materials and services. So the 3 different budgets, just wanted to go over some highlights. I don't want to go over all the line items. I'd be happy to answer any questions if I don't answer them up front. But the 1202 budget, it supports 7 firefighter EMTs, 1 compliance deputy fire marshal. I did want to highlight in that one an increase in insurance and bonds, just to tag on to what was spoke about last week. The Department's Public Works, and I think probably Library last week, talked about an increase in insurance and bonds. In 1202, the dollar amount increase isn't significant, but the percentage is more significant. But I just wanted to highlight it here because across the board in all of our budgets, there is that same commensurate increase in insurance and bonds. And then I wanted to just highlight the IT equipment replacement. Of the monies that are in there, a significant amount of that, the IT equipment replacement funds, are going to pay back the computer-aided dispatch records management system upgrade that we're doing with Lynn County. So we'll be paying that back over I think it's, if I remember right, over the next 10 years, and that's where the funding will come through for that. 1203, our fire and life safety budget. 1203, our fire and life safety budget. We've done some restructuring in the life safety division. You may have heard myself or Wes talk about the fact that we've struggled to hire a fire marshal, and it's a common struggle that's out there. For some reason, right now, a number of departments are having problems with that. So we've actually restructured it into a safety division chief's position, an individual that's going to focus on community safety and department safety, and some of the safety aspects, if you will, that I talked about earlier, this individual will handle. But through the budget process, we're able to add a compliance deputy fire marshal, so I've been able to strengthen my life safety division and put me in a situation where I don't have to have as technical of an expert in that fire marshal position as I've had in the past. And so what we've done is we've actually promoted an individual from in-house who's got passion, and he's got a long tenure in our department, and he's got the people skills to be able to lead the division. And then we're going to work with him on getting him the training that he needs over the next 2 or 3 years to have the technical expertise that he needs. So we've done some restructuring with that, and then also the risk reduction specialist. That was our old public educator's position, and like I said earlier, our focus is on community risk reduction, so have changed the title of that position just to focus on that. As I just spoke of, we filled one authorized unfunded deputy fire marshal compliance position. In this coming year's budget, we've increased our city emergency manager position to full-time. I spoke of Daryl Tedish earlier. He's been our part-time emergency management specialist for a number of years. I would venture to say probably at least 10, if not a little bit more than that, and then been with the fire department since, I believe, the early 70s. He's going to officially retire at the end of this calendar year, and so we're replacing him with a full-time position, and that position is going to be funded through central services, so all the departments will pay money for that. And that's because he's able to help all the different departments and does projects with every department in the city. And then you'll also notice in 1203's budget a decrease in our materials and supplies budget. In 1208, our fire suppression ambulance budget, we are filling the 3 authorized unfunded positions that I spoke of earlier. We are continuing the single role EMS response program. We're getting that going right now, and we're going to continue that in the coming year. The community paramedic program, we're searching for grants to continue that, and we hope to be able to provide funding through other sources, but I also want to make sure that we don't have a lapse in that service come December 31st, or I should say January 1st of 2017. So we're funding the community paramedic program for the last 6 months of this coming fiscal year. And then materials and services, I just listed out 6 items there. Software costs are due to a telestaff upgrade. We have a daily staffing program that in its current iteration, it's not being supported anymore. They're not doing upgrades to it, and so we're in a position where we need to upgrade it, and so that costs some funds, and so that's why there's some increases there in those 2 line items. Licensing and accreditation is going up because we are on a biennial cycle with the state of Oregon for our EMT and paramedic research. So every other year you see that dollar amount go up, and then the opposite year you see it go down. Last year it was down significantly because it was not a research year. This coming year is a recertification year. Credit card fees, medical supplies, and reimbursable meals are all going up. Those are all a direct reflection on the increase in ambulance calls that we go on and the increase in transfers as well. So running more calls, more people are putting their bill on their credit card, and so we have an increase in credit card fees. Medical supplies, we're treating more people, and so our supplies go up. We start more IVs, use more Band-Aids, all that type of stuff. And then the reimbursable meals are when we send a crew over a meal time on a transfer to Portland. We need to make sure that when they get back here, they're ready to go, because we're going to be putting them right back to work. And so we provide a meal when they're up there. And then the final one there, a maintenance of building. We've got some issues with the museum structure out at Station 12 that we don't use so much as a museum anymore. It's more of a training center. It's actually where we house our training lieutenant. And that building is coming into some disrepair, so we needed to spend some money and fix it up.
I apologize if I was asleep, but I didn't hear you bragging about acquiring Sandy.
Well, I didn't really want to rub that one in, so. But yes, we did acquire Sandy Roberts. I talked to her just this morning. She's been with us for 2 weeks. This is the start of week 3, and she said she feels like she's been here 2 months. So hopefully that's a good thing. She indicated it was, so she's hitting the ground running and doing an outstanding job.
Ray, they stole her from people who carry guns. Speaking of.
That's right.
I just said acquire, I didn't say how.
Yeah. So a few more budget highlights. In this budget, we're requesting equipment replacement funds to replace our firefighting protective gear, our turnouts that the firefighters wear when they go into a structure fire. We're on a replacement cycle. We already extended that replacement cycle twice. We have them maintained annually, and we're starting to see some degradation of those. And so I'm concerned that we might have pushed that just a little too far, and so this next cycle we may cut back a year on that. But we definitely need to replace those in the coming year. We are requesting to remount another medic unit. We've remounted 2 medic units so far. We just got the second one back last week, I think it was last week, and we're in the process of getting that put into service here real soon. So we need to do the third of the 3 that we purchased at the same time, and then I've got a 4th one that I'll be asking for remount on probably next year, if not sooner. So that will replace all of those medic units, and we'll be good on those medic units for a period of time. We also have 2 staff vehicles that are over 20 years old. I believe one's 21 and one's 22 years old, and just maintenance issues and problems, and it's commonly known you don't take those vehicles out of town if you got training, and it's just time for them to move on. So we're requesting to replace that. And then I also need to replace a Type 6 brush engine, and I might have talked to you about this last year, at least I've talked to the council about it. The current brush rig that we have that is in service, we have another one that's getting ready to come into service. In the summertime, we have to choose between whether it tows the boat or whether it carries water for fighting wildland fires. And so we need to get both of our Type 6 brush engines to the point that they can do everything that we need them to do, and they're not at that point right now. And then, excuse me, we're also requesting facility funds for doing parking lot repairs at Station 12, which is out on 34th Street, Station 13, which is out behind Home Depot, and then a water reclamation project out at Station 14. The parking lots, we've basically ignored those. Station 13 is probably the one that's in our greatest state of disrepair. That station was opened in 1998 and really hasn't had a whole lot, if any, maintenance on the parking lot since it was open. So it has some degradation and some issues, and it's a problem that we need to resolve. Some challenges going ahead. Provide consistent, adequate emergency response staffing. We're trying to do that by providing 3 more additional people. I fully that does not increase our minimum staffing at all. And so I fully expect that I'll be coming back to you next year and saying, okay, now we need to increase that minimum staffing so I can increase the reliability of having that medic unit or that fire engine available to be able to respond to the calls. The other challenge I talked quite a bit about earlier, and that's proactively addressing community hazards and risk reduction. And we're putting a focus on that as an organization, and I discussed a number of different ways that we're trying to do that. And then the final thing there is finance equipment replacement. If we were fully funded right now at this point in time, we'd need $2.2 or roughly $2.2 million to get us to that point. So equipment replacement is an ongoing issue that we deal with year in and year out. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just one on...
Ray, Scott raised his hand first. Go ahead, Scott.
So equipment replacement at $2.2 million, how much are you contributing to equipment replacement this year? I didn't see a line item.
No, we are actually not. I had to take a look at, do I deal with equipment replacement, or do I get the people on staff that I need to deal with that demand for service? And because we've seen such a significant increase in the demand for service, I chose to put the emphasis on getting the people in place to be able to deal with that, as opposed to putting monies toward the equipment replacement. My goal, my target would be for next year for us to be able to start putting money toward that.
My second question has to do with overtime. Are people complaining about overtime?
Periodically, yes. I mean, there's certain times during the year where it is difficult to get somebody to be able to work that overtime shift. There are a lot of overtime hours that are out there. And obviously, our crews step up routinely and regularly, and they work those overtime, and they do a great job at that. But there is definitely times that it is difficult, and it can be difficult to find somebody to work that position.
What is your cost difference for an overtime employee or an overtime shift versus a funded employee with PERS, training, equipment, medical, dental, all those things?
So I went to the council, I believe it was in March, and requested the 3 positions to be able to bring them on early so we could deal with the overtime right away. And to hire the 3 positions, the cost is $334,500. That's wages, benefits, everything. So almost $335,000. The cost for the overtime, the overtime cost to fill that vacancy, the vacancy of having to fill that overtime shift that we had to cover in this last year was approximately $400,000. So $400,000 for the overtime, $334,500 for the positions, which really put us in the position. I think Floyd actually asked the question last year of at what point in time does it make sense to hire the individuals versus paying the overtime. And when I took a look at those numbers this year and saw that difference, it was like, okay, it's time. It makes more sense to bring the individuals on to work in the full-time capacity as opposed to the overtime.
Right?
Okay, page 276 on your strategies and actions.
Yes.
It shows for a target date of 6/16, a couple of incompletes, but then it doesn't show that they're to be carried over to do anything about that in the following year.
So on both of those were tied more directly to our previous fire marshal and then his absence in leaving. There were projects that he was working on. With a new individual coming in, I didn't want to, and Mike Trevue was our fire marshal, and he left in September of 2015, and so I didn't want to continue those large projects, if you will, immediately for a new fire marshal or what turned out to be a new safety division chief. Doesn't mean we won't get back to them at some point in time, but they weren't ones that we chose to carry forward.
Okay, and then on page 280, under the 1208 Fire Emergency Services line item 61044, building materials. What do you use for building materials?
So 61044, is that the same one that I referred to? No. I believe that one is some of our maintenance contracts. Jane? Okay. We do, like annual maintenance on our sprinkler systems and different reoccurring costs that are associated with the facilities.
So the question is...
What are examples of building materials that you use in that line item?
So yeah, that line item, that's where we pay our garbage bill, that's where we buy our cleaning supplies for the stations, that's where we change the locks, the combinations on the locks. It's where we have overhead door come in or an overhead door company come in to make sure all the safety devices work on all of our doors. Security, we have security systems or fire alarm systems. We have to pay to have them tested annually. So it's maintenance items.
Garbage is maintenance?
Excuse me?
Garbage is maintenance? My accountant would slap me if I said that.
That's where we choose to pay it out.
Our accountants might slap us after that, but we'll see.
Bessie?
Chief, do we still have losses due to Medicare, or does the affordable, I mean, I don't know how the new insurance process works, and so do we still have losses?
Oh, significantly, yeah.
Significantly.
You know, of the $2.2 million that we collected last year, I don't know the number exactly off my top of my head, but I would venture a guess that what we invoiced was closer to $4.5 million. Usually it's even a greater amount that we write off because of Medicare capitation and then obviously Medicaid as well. So yeah, we invoiced a significantly larger amount than we actually collected. Our collection rate on what we invoice is somewhere in the 46%. However, it's of what is allowable. Our collection rate is significantly higher.
I was gonna say, yeah, you collect pretty good success on what you can
Correct.
collect.
Yes,
Okay.
very good success
Great.
on what we can collect.
Thanks.
This may be a Stuart question. Coming back to capital replacement, if 66011 isn't listed for fire emergency services or any of these, does that mean there's been no contribution since 2013-14 fiscal year? So if I read this right, police has contributed $908,000 over the past 4 years, and fire has contributed $0. Is that to imply that fire is funding police is funding part of what fire would need in the way of equipment replacement?
No.
Where does fires come from then if it's not being funded?
Fire had an accumulated reserve of its own.
Okay.
And we used some money last year to supplement, as you may recall. I think we put in some money from transient lodging tax. We have proposals in this year's budget to use some other revenue sources to try and fund that. It's, again, it's a policy choice as to how the council wants to do that, but to try and take it out of the operating budget, as Chief Bradner described, meant reducing the level of service, basically. So.
And the other thing that I would add to that is that we do occasionally bring money into that that isn't shown in there. We're in the process right now of selling an old truck company for $50,000. Those funds from that will go back into that equipment replacement fund. Also, when we send crews on conflagrations in the summertime, the amount of money that we receive back from the state for the equipment and the use of the equipment, because they pay for our engine to go to another part of the state, those funds go back into equipment replacement. So we're putting funds in, and we've expended those on previous ambulance remounts or staff vehicles or different things, different items along those lines.
You received a significant grant a few years ago that was spent on equipment, wasn't it? I can't remember what the name of it was, but it must have been more than a couple of years because I don't see it listed here.
Are you thinking about the SAFER grant?
Yeah.
The SAFER grant was for personnel.
Oh, it was,
we were able to
okay.
hire 6 firefighters with that.
Yeah.
In the past, you've talked about the difficulty of the communication equipment between your department, police department, sheriff's department. Have you been able to resolve those equipment challenges?
Not fully. We're not still on the same types of radios, types of systems. However, we have been able to acquire a number of portables and actually a mobile radio that we've installed in our battalion chief's command vehicle, where they can communicate, or on each rig it has a portable radio. Those individuals can communicate with the police department if they need to. So we've created a solution for the problem. The best solution for the problem is if we were all on the same type of a system, and at some point in time in the future we'll probably get there. It's a dollar cost item in order to get there. But I think as we stand right now, we're probably about as good as we can get without investing a large amount of money into correcting the whole problem.
Thank you.
Jeff.
This may also be a Stuart question, but it goes along with what we're talking about, public safety. But back under the general fund resource detail, there's 3 items listed as public safety, from public safety. One is public safety levy police, public safety levy fire. The other one is just public safety levy fund, 668,000. Where can I find that being expended in public safety?
You won't find a corresponding number, but those funds are what's received into the general fund from the public safety levy. The way the public safety levy is then allocated to the general fund for purposes of fire, police, and then there's an inflationary and equipment component. That's the third line item. Our resources into the general fund, you'll see some of those funded in the public safety police and public safety fire program. The balance of those dollars are in the larger programs in police and fire.
Actually, on the, but it's not actually, I can't actually see it on, like,
As a transfer in?
As a transfer in or anything like that?
No. General fund resources are pooled for the general fund.
Okay, so it's part of that pool that is being used as, in the overall police or fire budget?
Yes. The detail that would support, I think, where you're going, Jeff, is actually an off-budget spreadsheet.
Okay.
Where I identify the anticipated growth or change in public safety resources and how those are allocated both to police and fire, which is largely based on prior year budget and whatever adjustments were made to the prior year budget. So there's a proportional amount of public safety resources that are allocated both to police and fire. The one that is the balancing number is that third one, the inflationary one, and it's been referred to in the initial public safety levy as an inflationary or equipment replacement or training line item. Those were three purposes that were identified in addition to some operational needs that were first identified in the levy. So there's an off-site spreadsheet that takes those into consideration as to how that levy was first approved by voters and how it's been carried forward each year and then applied in police and fire as I described.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Didn't find an answer? Were you looking for the levy? I saw a whole bunch of cell phones.
The mayor left, so I think she's probably out searching.
Okay.
Just for an update on the election, Benton County is approving our levy by a margin of 66 to 33, I think, percent it is. 1,672 yes to 907 no. So assuming
and Lynn
that
County is 5932 yes to 2675 no.
Oh, very good.
Showing up on the report.
It is now, refresh it. We just saw it. Isn't that excellent?
Nothing
So
has
it's
shown
like
up on
68% it passed. So very little campaigning too, so that was great. It's wonderful. Kind of really shows how people are very supportive of our public safety. So.
That means we have to redo the budget.
That's a good thing.
This is great. So, boy, that's wonderful. Good job.
Well, if you don't want to redo the budget, I'm sure there are several departments that would just love to take the money without.
Okay. Hello, Ed.
Good evening. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and summarize the budget that we're pitching for the next fiscal year. Again, my purpose is to summarize what we do in the Parks and Recreation Fund or within the department, how we go about our business, because I think that's just as important as what we do, and then get into a broad brush of the proposed budget for this next year and highlight any significant changes.
I'll start off by saying there aren't very many significant changes from the current fiscal year going into the next fiscal year, but I'll point out a couple for you. There we go. I won't read this, but it's really important to us. We think of our mission, we promote it, and we would hope that anyone connected with us recognizes when we have succeeded and in our pursuit of our mission when we failed. And believe me, we hear both. So what we do in broad brush, we maintain property, public property, and we take care of or maintain and we manage those properties. We have about 900 acres of parks and open spaces. About half of that acreage is actually either undeveloped or barely developed. It tends to be conservation area, so it's managed to different purposes than a neighborhood park or a ball field complex. Nonetheless, it still takes resources to take care of those properties and fulfill our public obligations with those resources. We do have trails. I'm sure know what those trails look like. Some of you may not know that we take care of landscaped street medians on behalf of the city, and we also take care of the downtown streetscape, in part because we're responsible for maintaining all city trees on public right-of-way in the city. That's 14,000 plus trees on our city streets. The 14,000 number, by the way, is about it's a fraction of the total number of trees in the system that we manage. Most of the trees that we have to take care of are within parks and natural areas. I think we're very proud of the fact that with just very few resources, we take care of those trees, and we've been recognized for the 22nd year as a Tree City USA. We also, as most of you are aware, we're an award-winning organization in terms of the festivals and major events that we stage on behalf of the City Council and our citizens. Northwest Art and Air is certainly and River Rhythms are the two programs that are probably best recognized. Those two programs receive accolades every year. We get awards from our state and area associations that do such recognition for our volunteers, for our sponsors, certainly for the work of staff as well. We're very, very proud of those events in particular and the others that we stage throughout the year. Our major events draw, or are expected to draw, about 140,000 total participants this next year. I'm trying to remember when I first reported this number to the Budget Committee. I think it was 5 years ago, and we were about 90,000. So we continue to see an increase in participation, not only from members of the community, but from outside the community. Northwest Art and Air's visitation, about 60,000 people for a 2.5-day event, generates about 35% of that total from out of town. So it's an important event for us to stage, and it does attract people to Albany, if not for the night, at least for the day, and we get to brag a little bit about what Albany is and does for our community. There is an economic impact associated with these events, and the last time we actually did exit polls was in 2011. We interviewed about 1,500 people at Northwest Art and Air, and that event indicated, based on what people were reporting they spent, generated about $3.5 million in 2011 in direct expenditures. And these were people, many of whom stayed overnight and lived in other places. So again, there is a significant impact associated with this event. Now, the hoteliers in town will put a little bit different spin on that, but they will also acknowledge how important this event is. We also, as you would imagine, we provide recreation, educational, and cultural programs and experiences for our citizens as well. We don't stop with our citizens. We provide these same programs and opportunities to non-residents. but most of our participants are residents of the city of Albany. Just a handful of them to mention. We have a preschool. And again, maybe not all of you are aware that we run a preschool in Albany, Maple Lawn Preschool. We have a senior center. Some of you are possibly aware of that. I am well aware of it. I'm certainly within the demographic. And then we have adult recreation and fitness classes. We have family activities that attract all ages, newborns all the way through our senior population. We also have a building maintenance function that we're responsible for. Building maintenance is budgeted in Fund 701, a different fund than the Parks and Recreation Fund, but we are responsible for the management, the staffing of those activities. Building maintenance activities covers 19 city buildings and their grounds, currently about almost 300,000 square feet with 3 employees. And that's about to increase next year with the addition of a much larger police station and a larger fire station. So I don't know what the numbers are going to be, but they're going to be greater than 291,000 square feet. We also have aquatics and sports. You're well aware that we have a community pool at South Albany to run, and we also run the Cool Pool at Swanson Park every summer. Softball, basketball, etc. Aquatic and sports tournaments are additional heads in beds kinds of events for our community. We estimate a $2 million economic impact. Those are direct expenditures, no multiplier applied. We don't do that with our numbers. So if you applied the multiplier of anywhere from 3 to 7 times, which is typical, the number would be much higher than that. But it's a $2 million direct impact. And where that comes from is that people, when they come to a swim meet, for example, at the community pool, they'll stay for 2 or 3 days. Those events are multi-day events. Softball tournaments are multi-day events. Most of you are aware that my department at its front desk also supplies City Hall its general reception and customer service help as well. There are other activities we're involved in, and they're reflected in different parts of the budget. There's a community garden that is on property we maintain. We facilitate that every year. By the way, that community garden, that little community garden has about 60 to 70 spaces. They're always full, so it's a very well-used facility. We provide staff support for 3 different commissions, the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Albany Tree Commission, the Arts Commission, and I'd add also the Senior Center Endowment Committee is part of our responsibilities. And we manage the public arts program. We also have a little program we call Sawing for Schools. Some of you have heard of this from me over the last couple of years. To date, that program, taking salvaged timber from members of the community who donate the timber to us, we mill it, we cure it, we mill it, and then we produce lumber from it. The schools alone have received about 40,000 board feet of lumber over the past 8 years at a value of about $183,000. So it's a significant benefit, in particular to our high school woodshop programs. And we don't just work with our local high schools, we also have high schools from Corvallis, even Philomath participates in this event. So we have a little bit of a reach with this program. So that's what we do, and so now the question is, how do we go about it? And again, this is familiar to some of you, but we get lots of help. You'll see the numbers of employees that we have in the Parks and Recreation Department. I'll throw it out as about 28 FTE. That's not a lot for the work that we do. And the only way we can get it done is we get others involved in helping to deliver the services that are provided through the Parks and Recreation Department. We have partnerships with around 90 to 100 businesses and organizations throughout the community every year. That is a year-round, full-time job for Katie Nushazar and staff to solicit those relationships, maintain those relationships, and seek a repeat of that relationship in the subsequent years. So it's a very hard job. They're to be commended for the work that they do. The payoff is rich. We get the entire community involved in the activities that we stage for the community. Gifts and donations of cash and in-kind services this year will exceed $587,000. Now, that's, as you'll see, only about 5% of our total expenditure budget, the cash. But it's a really important 5%. Without that money, some of these activities simply don't happen. So the money is very important. And our businesses, our community members are, again, to be commended for stepping up to the plate and helping us provide those activities for the benefit of the entire community. We're very grateful for their participation. We also use about 38,000 hours from our volunteers every year. That's about 18 FTE. We have 28 FTE employed, another 18 we don't pay, and without them, nothing really happens. We're very pleased to have them involved as well. We like to think you get your money's worth. Some might question that. I don't. I think it's well worth the investment that the Budget Committee and ultimately the City Council put into Parks and Recreation Services. With 28 FTE for this next fiscal year, I'll tell you in a little bit where that position goes. That's one position increase over the previous fiscal year. That's about a half of an FTE per 1,000 residents. That's lower. That's about 30% of the average for our peer group nationwide. So it's a pretty good number. We secured cash donations per capita of about $7.86. This past year was down a little bit from previous years. I think kind of a residual hangover from the recession, but we fully expect that we'll be climbing back up. At one point, we peaked at $11 per capita. By the way, that compares with our peer group nationally very favorably. Our peer group solicits about $1 per capita, and we're sitting at about $8 or $9 to $11 at our peak. Very pleased. Capital projects, when we have money to do capital projects and we can leverage them with outside resources, we leverage those city dollars at about a 4-to-1 ratio. So grants, donations, and that sort of thing applied toward capital projects. An interesting little fact is that about 2/3 of all the work that's conducted in by the Parks and Recreation Department is actually delivered by non-employees. So factor in the sheriff's work crew, our contractors, our volunteers, everyone that doesn't get a paycheck from the city of Albany is factored into that equation. Most people think that we do a pretty good job. We haven't done a survey recently. The last one was in 2014. Again, those are pretty good numbers, and we strive to improve our relationship with our customers and our participants every year, but I think those are pretty good. Just a little bit about how we manage the money and how we manage budget challenges. In 2011, we peaked at 34 FTE in the department. We dropped down to about 26 and a half, I think is what it was, and we're bumping it back up to 28 with this next year's budget proposal. Part of what we do is we reclassify vacancies and vacant positions when they come up, and we see if there's a better way and a lower cost way of utilizing that FTE. That's a big part of our strategy, and we've done a lot of reclassifying over the past few years. 35% of our total Parks and Recreation Fund budget is personnel, 35%. So I don't know how that compares with some of the businesses represented around the dais here, but I think it's relatively low. And one thing that you should know, because this will come up as an issue again later in my presentation, is that we have virtually eliminated capital projects from our program. There is only one at this point that's on the table that will remain on the table, and I'll mention it in a little bit more detail in just a little bit. However, this past year, we had an opportunity that wasn't within the budget, anticipated in the budget, to replace the restroom at Bowman Park with a grant that matched local money with grant money by a 4-to-1 margin. So that 4-to-1 margin holds true for this particular project. So now about the budget for this upcoming year. The budget structure, 13 programs spread through 3 funds. I'm going to be talking essentially about one fund, Fund 202, the Parks and Recreation Fund, but I did want to remind you that you can find this in other places. This year, this current fiscal year, we didn't budget any project in the grant fund, but now we'll amend the budget and make sure that we have included the Bowman Park grant so that there's a proper accounting for that project. And I mentioned earlier that building maintenance is in a separate fund, Fund 701, which is managed by Finance. On the revenue side, you'll see that we have an exact match between the revenue total and the expenditure total. That's how it has to be, because Parks and Recreation Fund is a special revenue fund, so those two numbers have to be identical. You see the pie chart and where approximately the money comes from. I think I would just simply point out here that taxes, if you look at just our base operating programs, which you'll see in another 2 pages, is about 65% of our total revenue. If you factor in all expenses associated with the Parks and Recreation Fund, that number drops down to about 52%. And so I'll get there. Total expenditures, $8.8 million is what we're proposing. That's both what I called operating or base operations, and includes also the self-supporting funds, or programs. The self-supporting programs you see listed on the page there, but largely it's Park SDCs, which is a capital program, but as you see in the notes here, we don't actually propose to spend any of that money this year. We're just simply collecting it. And I'll point out why in my last couple of slides. Our operating programs will increase by about 4.5% this year, and that increase is driven by the addition of 1.0 FTE, about 6 months worth of that position this next fiscal year, going to park maintenance. It's been years and years and years since we increased staffing at park maintenance. And it's time, because we've seen a 50% increase in the acreage in the park system since 2007, but we haven't seen a corresponding increase in our staffing levels there. And we're just in too deep a hole now, so I am asking for an additional position there. On the expenditure side, this is the base operating program I mentioned earlier that excludes parks, SDCs, and the capital project program. And so you see the 8 programs and how the pie is spread out. I wanted to point out that administration at 25% seems large, but let me just share with you that the administration program budget includes expenses that are not allocated to any of the other programs. Central service charges this year went up significantly for the Parks and Recreation Fund. All of those are absorbed in the Parks Administration program, and they're not spread. We don't spread those out to other programs. So it seems large. It's actually large artificially because it includes expenses that we just haven't seen fit to budget in other programs. Issues, challenges, I guess we'll call this work to be done. I mentioned that we don't really have capital programs, capital projects to advance at this point. We have just one. You see it listed in the second bullet. This has been carried now for 2 budget years. We're still trying to renovate, replace facilities and equipment at Sunrise Park. It's largely a community development block grant project, but we do have some park fund resources in this project, primarily for design and most recently trying to identify and deal with wetlands, which we never would have expected be on that property, but now we're dealing with that. We have about $13.5 million worth of identified projects included in the current Parks Master Plan, the 2006 Master Plan. Those projects are not funded, so no funds identified, therefore the projects don't move forward. The plan will be updated this next fiscal year through our relationship with, our work with the U of O's Sustainable City Initiative that we've mentioned to the council previously. And we're just discussing scope for each of those projects right now. Aside from the capital projects that are listed in the Parks Master Plan, we also, as any property manager, management company has, lots of repair and replacement that needs to be done every year. When I talk about repair and replacement as differentiated from capital projects, we're talking about replacing sections of sidewalk or path that would fall maybe under that $5,000 threshold. That would define a capital project. We have electrical work that needs to be redone. We have roofs that need to be replaced. It really adds up in a park system like ours, especially a park system that is largely 40 to 45 years old. A lot of our facilities are well in excess of 30 years old. And so as time goes on, those expenses climb year to year when we don't seem to be able to find the resources to take care of the annual repair and upkeep of those facilities or replacement of the equipment in our parks. And so I've identified that as a major issue that we just can't seem to get our hands wrapped around. Our staffing levels, although we're adding a position in park maintenance this year, we're still shy 2 to 3 positions, in my view, to adequately staff. We're not asking anyone else for money to do that. We identify the resources as we can. We fix the problem ourselves. But right now, I can't fix the whole problem. I can only take care of one additional position. I don't think anyone else has mentioned this, but with the new state minimum wage increases that we'll see crescendoing over the next few years, it will put a strain, especially on the Parks and Recreation Department, and our ability to continue our service levels. We hire a lot of temps. We hire the most temps of any, probably more temps than all other city departments combined every year. And those temps are primarily used in the summer months, and they're used in our aquatics programs and our recreation programs. Those are the programs and those are the positions that are most affected by the minimum wage law, obviously. And so as it crescendos, as it increases over the next few years, it'll put additional burden on us to try to figure out how to keep the service levels where they are as our expenses are increased in order to provide those services. So I mentioned that just in case that hasn't been previously mentioned in other presentations. I also wanted to mention that we are launching a new 501c3 Albany Parks and Recreation Foundation. We filed the paperwork. I serve as an ex officio to the board, which is a private board. We filed the paperwork, as I said. We're waiting to hear from the IRS. We've got our employee identification number and other approvals. So as soon as we're up and running, this foundation will, we believe, assist us in generating a higher level of contribution from the community than we currently see. It'll also allow us to apply for grants that we, the city, cannot apply for because there are some foundations out there that by charter, by article, cannot give a grant to a government entity. they have to give it to another 501c3. So it should open up some doors for us that are not currently open. With that, I'd be glad to answer your questions. I have lots of notes on detail, but I didn't provide that.
Ray?
Just a couple on page 286, your parks revenue. Second, last item on the bottom, 46015, legacy lumber, shows revenue going from adjusted budget of 10,000 to 2,000.
Okay, yes.
And then I'm just trying to put how that wraps around. If you go over to page 295 on the park maintenance services, lumber legacy, 61077 has a $10,000 maintenance service with only a $2,000 revenue. Is that just?
So you've identified the revenue coming in, and then you've identified the expenditures. On the revenue line, the $2,000, which was a decrease from the previous year, we're being really conservative with our revenue estimates. The previous year, we conducted an auction, and we generated pretty significant revenue off the sale of those pieces that were produced by wood artists. And I don't know if any of you were there, but it was a successful first attempt. We're not doing the auction this year. We want to give ourselves a rest, to be blunt about it. It was a lot of work for $10,000 or so. But those expenses associated with the internship programs that we sponsor, we fund, are still there. So we budgeted the full expenditures for this next year. We'll continue throughout this next fiscal year trying to pull in additional revenue. We've got some benches out here in City Hall that we are launching an effort. Once the Parks and Recreation Foundation is up and running, it will be the vehicle through which we try to generate sales on wood pieces that have been created by students that are involved in the internship program. That'll generate some additional revenue. I can't predict it right now, so that's why you see the difference between the two numbers.
And then one last question. I think it's probably just a typo, maybe on page 313, facilities maintenance.
Okay.
Last item, 66511, budget proposed. It shows a 100% reduction, but they're identical. It's only 100.
That would be a typo. Thank you.
I guess not so much a question, but I would point out and give you some kudos. I asked that I asked people to, in other funds, to give outcomes, and I was told that, well, gee, you just can't measure that. Well, I point out here, you told us how much money you got, where it came from, where it went to, and what the outcome was, and what the outcome for Albany was. It's exactly what I wanted to know from the other folks. They didn't seem to think they could give it. So I guess I give you kudos because you're way ahead of the game.
Well, kudos are nice. Thank you.
Will?
On page 297, you had a significant increase in your line item 61038, software.
Yes.
And I was just wondering what that was all about.
Yeah, and I failed to mention that in my notes. We are replacing this next year on our registration software. We have current registration software purchased years ago. It's no longer serviceable. That company has gone away. So we're in the last year of our use of that software, so we have to find a new one.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, that will give us online registration service when we're fully up and running, which is far superior to what we have right now.
Does that happen to be the same one that the county parks is using?
That I don't know, Rich.
Yeah, I'm wondering how the South Albany pool is holding up.
How it's holding up?
Yeah. Do we maintain that, or does the school district maintain it?
So yes and yes.
Yes.
It's under lease, as you might recall. We lease it from them, and we take care of the systems that are required to deliver the recreational experience. So the filtration systems, Rob would be able to give you a dissertation on this, but pumps, filtration systems, everything that takes care of the water, establishes the quality of the water that we need to put people in. We take care of that.
Yeah.
The shell, the building itself, is to be maintained by the school district.
Okay.
And sometimes there's a little bit of tug and pull there, because they sometimes tell us they don't have the resources, and sometimes we tell them we don't have the resources, but if it's really something that is needed and it needs to be done now, we just bite the bullet and we do it.
I've only used it once, but I think it's one of the best decisions we made back in the 70s.
You know, for as old as it is, Rob and his staff have done an incredible job in taking care of that facility, and we've invested quite a bit in the facility since we took over in 2005. It's one little factoid that's not greatly acknowledged or widely acknowledged. We actually put a lot of money into the building.
Bessie? Sure. On page 302, your objectives and strategies.
Okay.
I just wondered, it says rebrand the Northwest Art and Air Festival to reflect new sponsors. What do you mean by rebrand? Oh, Katie's got her mic.
Well, what drives that objective is the departure as a title sponsor of ATI.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they left us early this calendar year. They just said that they were going in a different direction. So instead of tens of thousands, we have a much lower sponsorship level from them. And so we're in a mode right now of trying to find replacement sponsors. What that means is everything that said ATI Wauchang on it has to go away. That means signage, banners, advertising materials, everything goes away, and we have to reinvent it. So, yeah.
So that explains a lot of the increases in your advertising and
Yes,
publications.
yeah, that's the primary driver of those cost increases.
Are they falling on hard times or just going away?
Well, I guess what we were told is that they're just going in a different direction. They have other things that they would rather fund this year. So we'll get them back sometime in the future, but right now that's their corporate decision.
They've moved their marketing back east, and so they used to have a local person handling all of their marketing, and that's gone back to corporate back east, and so that's helped to drive that decision.
They have a different perspective on the East Coast of West Coast activities.
Sharon?
They haven't been to one of our concerts.
Oh, yeah.
No, and I'm really pleased, though, that you're going to be having the U of O students work on coming up with some, new funding sources. But I think, what we've been seeing off of your budget, the past 5 years, we're not gaining ground. We're really kind of going back and backwards and really getting a backlog of needed maintenance and equipment replacement. So I'm looking forward to what the results, the recommendations will be from that study, and I think it's going to be something that, the council and budget committee will all have to really get behind.
Well, I'll be even more blunt. Whatever they come up with is not going to be a finger in the dike even. We have such a deficit on the capital side right now and the major repair and replacement side of the equation that I don't care how much new revenue you can generate via nickels and dimes and increases that might come to us through the U of O. It's going to be an increasingly large issue for this community to come to grips with. And the risk is, as we are seeing playing out, the risk is that as these facilities age, deteriorate, eventually we have to take them out of service and they are no longer available to the community. And we're seeing some facilities get awfully darn close to that. In fact, we have pulled some equipment out over the years. So it's not a sky is falling kind of argument that I'm making. I'm just saying that sometime between now and when, it's an issue that the community at large is going to have to deal with.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
It's like anything else, bridges, roads, park equipment has a lifespan.
Yes, and those pieces can be pretty expensive. So.
Well, and to kind of piggyback on that, I'll even be a little more blunt. One of the things that has to happen in the Parks Department budget is, I think a real hard look has to be made at some of the things that are being funded through the Parks Department, and those are going to be very, very tough decisions to make. The example I throw out is in the administrative budget. There's almost $104,000 going out to outside agencies. Two of those outside agencies I'm a huge supporter of, so I'm not saying anything at all about those agencies, the Boys and Girls Club and YMCA. A huge supporter personally of those areas. But those are hard decisions that I think the city's going to have to make at some point, because when we can't maintain our parks, boy, that's a lot of money sitting on the table that could be used for those things. I'm not suggesting that anything at all be done about it tonight or this budget. It's something that needs to really be looked at hard.
Yeah, that's come up the previous couple of years, and it is a really tough choice to make, right? Okay.
Looks like we're done.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, thank you.
Okay, is there any other Budget Committee discussion this evening? Any other business? Our next meeting is Thursday, May 19th. So this meeting is continued to May 19th, 2016. And just a reminder that you do have one handout for Thursday already handed out tonight that was economic development. This one here. All right, meeting adjourned.